Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Go into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and call upon his name. Please be seated. It is a day of thanksgiving, the end of our pledge campaign and our ingathering, and a day we mark with the readings for Thanksgiving Day and a sacrifice of thanksgiving and praise. When my family can gather around a dinner table, and when we remember to give thanks, we like to go around the table and say something that we're grateful for. My younger kids tend to say stuff like candy, and Paw Patrol, and video games, which is lovely. But we try to encourage them, to go a little deeper, not beyond that initial, stuff we like category. We set the example by pointing to family or to church or to something lovely someone did that day. Moving from the things that you merely like and enjoy to the things that you value that are truly important to you. But simple gratitude gets complicated pretty quickly because in trying to encourage them, you're trying to get past just the stuff you like to stuff you're truly grateful for, because that's not just stuff you like. You got to move to the stuff that's really valuable to you, something central to you. But it has to be something you had nothing to do with. It's one thing to, praise yourself, praise, things, be grateful for how work went today without, kind of praising yourself for having that job and putting yourself in that position. Things you had nothing to do with. But then you almost come back around to that naive, childlike view. Because my kids had nothing to do with Paw Patrol's creation. They have everything to do with it being on all the time. But they didn't invent candy. They didn't develop those video games. Each of those things presents itself as, just this wonderful thing that just appears like a gift. Simple gratitude becomes complicated. And I wonder if we're not as grateful as we think we are sometimes. I wonder, how do we recover that childlike wonder of seeing things as gifts? How do we recover the sense, the discipline of gratitude? The problem is that it's very easy to get caught up in consumption, in the transactional, especially when it comes to our spiritual lives. This is what Jesus is looking at in today's gospel. A little context for what we call the bread of life discourse here. Jesus has just multiplied bread and fish. It's a power called multiplication. You make more of what wasn't there. Some saints have it. Jesus has it. I don't. Would have been a useful skill for the brunch. But Jesus does it. He multiplies few resources and manages to feed thousands. He then walks on water, at which point the crowds catch up with him and they ask, how did you get here? And he thinks that the question has little to do with the fact that he was just walking on water or that he is a miraculous Messiah. They're just there for the bread. Jesus says, very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Don't work for food that perishes. Don't go wandering around looking for stuff like this. Look for the food that endures. Okay, says the crowd, what do we have to do to perform these works of God? Jesus answers them, okay, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. God does not have a mission, God is mission. God is the sending out of God's own loving self for life and love and justice and peace and joy. All you have to do is believe. All you have to do is participate in that sending out that I represent. The crowds are obstinate in their not getting it. And you can see Jesus kind of seething. Okay, what sign are you going to give, say the crowds, so that we can see and believe you? I just walked on water. You can tell he's in it. Very truly, I tell you, it wasn't Moses who gave you bread from heaven. It was my Father who gave you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to him, then give us that bread all the time. I'm the bread of life. You get it? You and I, in our gratitude, as we conceive it, seek out bread, whether it's the right church or the right job, the right family, the right place in life. And we're grateful. But this is to get caught up in a transactional relationship with God and neighbor. It's a world of ceaseless desires. And we're just grateful they got met. And when they're not, we're not. But Jesus, as the bread of life, imagines a life beyond hunger and thirst, beyond craven need and its satisfaction. It's a freedom from want, the want that infects our economy and our politics. It's imagining a life beyond hunger and thirst where you're free, where you have enough to share. Human gratitude ends up just being stuff you like, but it's gratitude for the stuff that we don't deserve, that we aren't entitled to, that we didn't have anything to do with. That's the stuff we're looking for. The outsized American sense of what we're owed and what we paid for leaves us in a world where we don't have to thank anyone for anything. Friday was Armistice Day, Veterans Day. And we're a nation of semi-ingrates. Not because we fail to honor those who make our freedoms possible, though we could always do more, but because we tend to think we're worth the sacrifice. We earned that gift. What we do now is worth what others gave up. And we live a life of thanklessness and ingratitude because people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. And I suspect that the problem with a world that where you get what you deserve and deserve what you get is that it's based on selective memory. It's easy to forget that we didn't always earn what we've received. We tend to forget how accidental even our greatest achievements are. In Deuteronomy, a Thanksgiving offering ritual is proposed, demanded, required. You bring the first fruits of the harvest. You bring them to the temple, hand them to a priest in a ceremony that is suspiciously like our offering plate. It's actually the other way around. And you tell a story. A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien, few in number. And there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. When the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us by imposing hard labor on us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. He heard our voice, saw our affliction, our toil, our oppression. He brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power, with signs and wonders. He brought us into this place, gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now I bring the first fruit of the ground that you, Lord, have given me. This is an ancient creedal affirmation. And strangely, there's no mention of Sinai. There's no mention of Horeb. There's no mention of the Ten Commandments and the law on the tablets. There's a story of what God has done in history and for the giver. The giver must acknowledge that the achievements, these fruits, were not entirely their own. Their achievements, their having arrived at the promised land is not their doing. And so they don't give as an afterthought, they give first, the first fruits of the harvest. Our memories are selective. Everyone congratulates me on being ordained, and it would be very easy to get caught up in that and forget the thousand graces that I had absolutely nothing to do with. I was told about Holy Cross by the diocese. I passed by it every day. I never knew the community was here until someone told me, you should go there and interview as an intern. And if the rector at the time had asked the same questions the same way that everyone else had asked, why has your process taken this long? I wouldn't be here. Because I didn't have an interrogator, I was here. For 5 years, I've been welcomed. It didn't have to go that way. Here we are, after years in the wilderness of pandemic and we're still in the wilderness. But for 1,000 graces, we might not be. The church is still here. We still gather. We still give thanks and praise. But this achievement was not ours. Sacrifices of hundreds, thousands, and in the world, millions, some unnecessary, were made. It's easy to forget that we didn't earn what we give, how accidental even our greatest achievements are. Our memories are selective. So the solution is given in Scripture, that we were given these rituals. And if we're to recover the discipline of gratitude, if we're going to tune ourselves to that which we did not earn and give thanks, then it's necessary to throw ourselves into those rituals anew. Eucharist in Greek means thanksgiving. I want you to come to this table perhaps a little differently today, especially today on a day of Thanksgiving. To throw ourselves into the rituals of Thanksgiving. When we come to this table, we don't remember all of our successes. We remember how precious those achievements, how accidental, how fragile those things are. We won't remember selectively our own power. We remember with grace the God who was faithful all along. We tell and offer up our story. Listen anew to the ritual and the prayers. The entire reason we have a liturgy of the word before a liturgy of the Eucharist is so that we can recite salvation history, given in the Hebrew scriptures, understood by the early church, and proclaimed in the gospel. And even before we get to the table and the breaking of bread and the pouring of wine and all of that, there's a whole recitation of salvation history. Lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. It is, let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It's right to do that sort of thing. Throw yourself into the ritual. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things, says the church. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard in the saints, and the God of peace will be with you. We must recover these stories to be able to tell our own stories about how we came to be where we are and God's role in that. We have to be as faithful to that story as God is to us. To recover the sense of gratitude, we have to recover the sense of prayer and thanksgiving and worship. And in real gratitude, understanding that we have been given so much that we have enough to share. Give and give thanks. When my family can gather around a table, when we remember to do that, we offer the things that we're thankful for. When this church family gathers around this table, listen and give thanks. Bring the things you love. Bring the things you value. And share the first fruits of the wondrous things God has done for you and for us all. Lay aside the transactions and recall the wondrous, wonderful things that God has done. Celebrate and give thanks for the love, the joy, and the peace that only appears as a gift from God. Amen.